Pirates lived crammed together on floating wooden boxes for months. No toilets, no running water, no soap. By every modern standard, they should have been dead within weeks. But here's what's strange. Most pirate crews stayed healthier than people living in actual cities back then. How? The ship's toilet had a name. They called it the head. And no, not because sailors were idiots. It got that name because the toilet sat at the very front of the ship, the head of the vessel. Why put a toilet there? Simple. Waves constantly crashed against the bow. Every splash washed away whatever you left behind. Nature's flush, basically. But here's where it gets interesting. Using this toilet wasn't like walking to your bathroom at 2 a.m. Pirates had to grip a rope, lean out over the bowsprit, and hang their bare backsides over open ocean. One wrong wave, one slippery hand, and you're fish food. I've had some sketchy bathroom experiences in my life. Gas station restrooms that looked like crime scenes, but dangling over shark-infested waters while trying to do your business, that's a whole different level of commitment. Now, the positioning wasn't random. Prevailing winds blew from bow to stern on most sailing routes. So putting toilets at the front meant smells blew away from the crew instead of straight into their faces. Smart, right? And the saltwater spray? It actually worked as a natural disinfectant. Bacteria couldn't multiply on wood that got constantly doused with salt. The ocean was basically cleaning the toilet for them. But here's the catch. Most ships had only 2 or 3 toilet seats for crews of 80 to 200 men. Do the math. That's maybe 90 seconds per person if everyone needed to go in the same hour. During storms, though, everything changed. Nobody was climbing out on that bowsprit in 30-foot swells, so crews used buckets below deck instead. Buckets that sloshed, buckets that spilled, buckets that turned the sleeping quarters into something that would make a sewer rat gag. Those storm buckets created the most dangerous sanitation conditions of any voyage. But the real nightmare wasn't what happened above deck. It was what pooled below. Every wooden ship leaked. Every single one. Even brand new vessels took on water through the seams because wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. That's just physics. But here's where it gets nasty. All that seeping seawater collected in the lowest part of the ship, the bilge. And it didn't stay clean for long. Sewage dripped down. Food scraps fell through deck cracks. Dead rats decomposed in the darkness. After a few weeks at sea, you basically had a toxic swamp sloshing around beneath your feet. The smell? Legendary. Experienced sailors claimed they could judge a ship's overall health just by taking one whiff below deck. If the bilge smelled like death, warmed over twice, that ship was in trouble. So crews pumped constantly. On larger vessels, men worked the bilge pumps in rotating 4-hour shifts around the clock. Day and night. No breaks. Miss a few shifts, and that foul water would rise high enough to contaminate supplies and weaken the hull. Now here's something clever. Captains regularly poured vinegar into the bilge because its acidity slowed bacterial growth. Did it smell great? Absolutely not. But vinegar stench beat rotting corpse stench any day of the week. And this wasn't optional cleanliness, it was survival. Ships that neglected pumping developed ship fever outbreaks at 3 times the rate of well-maintained vessels. 3 times. One lazy pump crew could doom everyone aboard to weeks of vomiting, fevers, and worse. Smart captains treated bilge duty as seriously as battle stations. Skip your shift, you'd face punishment. Because in the cramped world of a pirate ship, one careless decision rippled through the entire crew. Makes sense, right? You're all breathing the same air, drinking from the same barrels, sleeping feet apart from each other. But fighting foul water was only half the battle. The really chaotic part? Managing when 80 men could actually use the bathroom. And trust me, those schedules got strict. Most pirate ships ran on schedules tighter than your grandmother's weekly bingo routine. And waste disposal? That followed the strictest schedule of all. Here's why. You've got maybe 80 men sharing 2 toilet seats. Do the math. Without order, you'd have chaos. Actual chaos. Men fighting over the head while dysentery spreads through the crew. So captains established rotation systems based on watch schedules. Officers got first crack at dawn, then the morning watch crew, then the next group, and so on. But here's the clever part. The timing wasn't random. Crews waited roughly 20 minutes between users. That gave waves enough time to splash the platform clean and carry waste far from the hull. Use it too soon after another sailor, you're squatting in someone else's mess. Nighttime brought different rules entirely. Nobody hung over the bowsprit in darkness. One wrong step, and you're shark food. Instead, designated buckets sat in specific spots below deck. And I mean specific. Move the bucket, punishment. Miss the bucket, worse punishment. At first light, the night buckets got emptied immediately. No exceptions. Even if there was a storm brewing. Even if the cook was serving something almost edible for once. Now, violating these rules wasn't treated like some minor offense. I've read accounts where sailors received lashings for improper waste disposal. Sounds extreme until you realize one careless mistake could contaminate the water supply and kill half your crewmates. The real nightmare scenario, being becalmed. No wind meant no waves. No waves meant waste just floated there, right next to the ship, for days. Smart captains ordered men to row small boats away from the vessel specifically to dump waste at a distance. Imagine being assigned that job. Congratulations, you're rowing the poop canoe today. But schedules only worked if waste actually disappeared. And here's where things got hands-on. Literally. Every morning, without fail, sailors grabbed buckets and brushes before the sun fully rose. This wasn't optional. This was survival. The process worked like this. Seawater got hauled up and thrown across the planks. Then came sand, handfuls of it scattered everywhere. And then, crews dropped to their knees and scrubbed like their lives depended on it, because honestly, their lives did depend on it. Here's what most people don't realize. Wood loves to rot, especially wet wood sitting in tropical heat with bits of food, spit, blood, and who knows what else ground into every crack. Leave that mess alone for 3 days and you've got yourself a bacteria farm. But salt changes everything. Seawater contains enough sodium to seriously slow bacterial growth between scrubbings. Not kill it completely, but slow it down enough to matter. Smart, right? Now let's talk about holy stones. These were soft sandstone blocks roughly the size of a Bible. Sailors called them holy stones because using them meant spending hours on your knees, like praying. I'd personally rather be praying. Crews rubbed these stones across every inch of deck surface. The grinding action smoothed out splinters where germs loved hiding and stripped away the organic gunk that caused problems. And here's a bonus nobody expected. All that scrubbing prevented shipworms from destroying the hull. These little nightmares tunneled through damp, dirty wood and could weaken a ship until it literally fell apart mid-voyage. Cleanliness wasn't just about health, it was structural engineering. Captains who enforced daily deck scrubbing reported noticeably fewer sick sailors than captains who got lazy. The crews noticed too. A dirty ship meant a death ship. The old expression, clean enough to eat off, that actually came from well-maintained naval vessels where deck hygiene reached genuinely impressive levels. But keeping decks clean only solved part of the problem. What about the food being stored right beneath those spotless planks? Now here's where things get really interesting. Keeping waste away from food. Salted meat wasn't just preserved. It was practically embalmed. Crews packed beef and pork in barrels with so much sodium that no bacteria could survive in there. We're talking meat lasting up to 2 years. 2 years! I've had leftovers go bad in my fridge after 3 days. But salt wasn't the only strategy. Smart captains kept live animals on board. Chickens, goats, sometimes even pigs wandering around the deck. Sounds chaotic, right? It was, but fresh meat was the only protein you could absolutely trust. No guessing whether it had gone bad. If the chicken's still clucking, dinner's still safe. Then there's hardtack. Those infamous ship biscuits baked not once, not twice, but 4 times to remove every drop of moisture. Completely dry food can't grow bacteria or mold. It also can't taste like anything resembling actual food, but that's a separate problem. And here's the part that still makes me cringe. After a few months at sea, weevils infested everything. Those hardtack biscuits, crawling with tiny bugs. So sailors learned to eat in complete darkness. Can't see the weevils, can't be bothered by them. Out of sight, out of stomach-turning horror. Storage location mattered enormously too. Provisions had to stay above the bilge waterline at all costs. One splash of that toxic soup we talked about earlier, your entire food supply becomes poison overnight. Captains who got careless with barrel placement lost crews to food poisoning faster than any battle could manage. The solution was rotation. Oldest supplies used first, newest supplies to the back. Basically the same system your grocery store uses today. Pirates invented inventory management before spreadsheets existed. Pretty clever for guys we think of as lawless criminals, right? But all this careful food storage meant nothing if one crucial resource went bad. And contaminated water killed more sailors than everything else combined. Fresh water was liquid gold. Actually, scratch that. Gold couldn't keep you alive in the middle of the Atlantic. Water could. Each sailor got roughly 1 gallon per day. That's it, for drinking, cooking, and whatever sad attempt at washing they could manage. In Caribbean heat, that barely kept a man conscious, but here's the disgusting part. Those wooden water casks, they started growing things within weeks. Algae, bacteria, mysterious slime that turned perfectly clear water into something resembling swamp juice. Sailors would dip their cups and pull out liquid that looked green enough to photosynthesize. So how did they not die immediately? Alcohol. They added rum or wine to almost every water ration. Not because pirates loved partying, although, let's be honest, they did, but because ethanol kills microorganisms. This mixture called grog became standard issue on nearly every ship. Your daily drink was basically a survival cocktail. And the weird part is, nobody fully understood why it worked. They just knew crews drinking grog got sick less often than crews drinking straight water. Rainwater collection became an actual skill. Experienced sailors could rig canvas sheets to funnel maximum rainfall into storage casks. When those tropical storms hit, smart crews weren't cursing. They were collecting. Then there's the island problem. Ships stopping for supplies sent armed parties, armed mind you, specifically to find fresh springs. Sometimes they'd fight locals just for access to clean water. Sounds extreme until you realize what bad water actually did. One contaminated barrel could sicken 50 men within 3 days. Dysentery, typhoid, cholera if they were really unlucky. More sailors died from drinking bad water than from cannonball storms and scurvy combined. I'll say that again. Water killed more pirates than actual pirate stuff. Now, staying hydrated was only half the battle, because even clean sailors wearing filthy clothes, that's where things get truly crawly. Now, here's something nobody talks about. Sailors owned maybe 2 or 3 sets of clothes, total, for voyages lasting months. They'd wear each outfit until the fabric turned stiff with salt and sweat, then rinse it in seawater, which, by the way, never actually cleaned anything. It just redistributed the filth. Sounds disgusting. It was. But the hammock? Absolute genius. See, before hammocks became standard, sailors slept directly on wooden decks. Damp, filthy decks crawling with bacteria and standing moisture. Disease spread like gossip at a family reunion. Then someone borrowed the hammock idea from Caribbean natives, and death rates dropped dramatically. Why? Simple physics. Elevated sleeping meant no contact with contaminated surfaces. Air circulated around the body. Moisture couldn't pool underneath you. Whenever weather permitted, crews dragged their hammocks topside and hung them in direct sunlight. They didn't know about ultraviolet rays killing microorganisms. They just noticed that sun-dried bedding smelled better and caused fewer rashes. Accidental science at its finest. Then there's the lice situation. Every sailor had them. Every single one. Infestations grew so common that picking parasites off clothing became a group activity during calm seas. Men would sit together, hunting through seams and folds, chatting while executing tiny vampires. Weirdly social, honestly. Here's the clever part, though. Experienced sailors coated their clothes in tar. Yes, actual tar. Made the fabric waterproof, sure, but it also created slick surfaces where lice couldn't grip properly. Fashion statement? Absolutely not. Survival strategy? You bet. When ships finally reached port, smart captains ordered all clothing boiled in seawater. One of the only times fabric got genuinely sterilized. Crews looked forward to port stays for many reasons. Clean clothes ranked surprisingly high, but keeping clothes and bedding clean meant nothing if the ship itself was rotting underneath them. And every few months, pirates had to do something that left them completely vulnerable to attack. Here's the thing about keeping a ship clean at sea. You can scrub the decks every single day, pump the bilge until your arms fall off, and follow every waste protocol perfectly. But eventually, the whole vessel needs a proper deep clean, and you can't do that while floating. So pirates would intentionally beach their ships. They'd find a hidden cove, wait for high tide, sail right onto the sand, then wait for the water to recede. Once the ship sat on dry land, crews used ropes and pulleys to tip the entire vessel onto its side. The whole thing, just lying there like a beached whale. Now they could finally reach the underwater sections. And let me tell you, what they found down there was absolutely disgusting. Months of accumulated filth, barnacles growing in thick clusters, seaweed hanging off like a gross green beard, rotting organic matter that had been festering in the darkness. All of it had to go. Crews scraped every inch with metal tools, revealing wood that hadn't seen sunlight since the last careening. But scraping was just the beginning. The real magic happened below deck. Sailors would burn sulfur in enclosed spaces, creating thick toxic smoke that filled every corner, every crack, every tiny crevice where rats and insects hid. Nothing survived that fumigation. It was basically chemical warfare against pests. And here's something practical. Barnacle buildup alone could slow a ship by 30%. That's the difference between escaping the Royal Navy and swinging from a gallows. Clean hulls meant faster ships. Survival wasn't just about health, it was about speed. The catch? Careening left vessels completely defenseless. A beached ship can't run, can't maneuver, can't fight. So pirates posted armed lookouts everywhere and chose coves hidden from main shipping routes. But even the cleanest ship meant nothing if sick sailors came aboard. Which brings us to quarantine practices, and those got brutal fast. Now here's where things got really dark. When a sailor started sweating through his hammock with a raging fever, the crew didn't gather around with soup and sympathy. They grabbed him and moved him as far away as humanly possible, usually to the bow, sometimes to a makeshift tent on deck, anywhere that wasn't near everyone else. Cruel? Maybe. But also the reason entire crews didn't drop dead. Pirates didn't understand germs. They had no clue about bacteria or viruses. What they did understand was patterns. When one guy got sick and stayed with the group, suddenly 10 guys got sick. When one guy got sick and got isolated, usually just one guy died instead of 20. Simple math, really. Ships even flew yellow flags when carrying sick passengers. This wasn't just a courtesy, it was law in most ports. See a yellow flag, stay away. No trading, no visiting, no contact whatsoever. Port authorities would literally fire cannons at ships trying to dock while flying that flag. And surgeons, when ships actually had them, took things further. They'd separate fever patients from wounded sailors. Different symptoms meant different isolation areas. They couldn't explain why this worked. They just knew it did. But here's the cold reality that nobody likes talking about. Pirates frequently abandoned severely ill crewmates at ports. Just left them there. Sounds horrific until you realize one case of typhus or smallpox could kill half your crew within weeks. It was brutal math, but it was survival math. On the flip side, sailors who'd survived previous outbreaks became incredibly valuable. Their immunity made them safer to work alongside. Some even commanded higher wages because of it. Your medical history literally affected your paycheck. Interesting how isolation could save a crew. But what about actually treating the sick? That required a very specific person with a very questionable toolkit. Most pirate surgeons had zero formal training, not a single day in medical school. They learned by watching someone else hack off limbs and hoping they remembered the important bits. And honestly, that was enough to save countless lives. These guys focused on two things: keeping wounds clean and spotting contagious symptoms before they spread. Simple stuff. But simple stuff works when everyone else is panicking. Now here's where it gets interesting. Amputation kits were standard equipment on every pirate ship. Not because surgeons loved cutting off arms, because removing an infected limb fast was often the only way to stop gangrene from killing the whole patient. Brutal? Absolutely. Effective? More than you'd think, but the real miracle cure? Citrus fruits? Surgeons handed out oranges and limes whenever they could get them. They had no idea what vitamin C was, never heard the word, yet they noticed something wild. Sailors who ate fruit kept their teeth. They kept their energy. They didn't bleed from their gums or collapse on deck. My grandmother used to say, "Eat your oranges every winter." Turns out 18th century pirates figured that out before modern medicine did. Then there's mercury. Surgeons rub this poisonous metal directly onto wounds and sores. Sounds insane, right? Well, mercury actually has antimicrobial properties. Sometimes it prevented infections worse than the mercury poisoning itself. Not exactly a win, but not a total loss either. And rum? That beautiful liquid did triple duty. Anesthetic before surgery. Antiseptic during surgery. Morale booster after surgery. Surgeons poured it on everything and everyone. Here's the stat that matters most. Ships carrying surgeons experienced roughly 40% fewer deaths from disease than ships without one. 40%. That's not a small edge. That's the difference between a crew that survives and a ghost ship drifting into port. But even the best surgeon couldn't help if the ship itself was falling apart. And that's exactly what happened when crews ignored one critical maintenance task.